G'day friends and fans. Welcome to Dave Talks After Ukraine War Update for the 12th of August 2025. I'm your host, the author David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood of Cain, Power Games, Into the Elsebound, and The Erotic Tales from the Empire, Part 1 available now on Amazon. Thank you to all those who support the channel, and I invite you to support the channel through the links in my link tree. Ta-da! All my links are in the link tree. You can support me on Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. Now the war in Ukraine continues. We are 93 hours away from the Trump-Russia summit, or the Trump-Putin summit, I should say. The US is looking for a deal, while Ukraine is looking for getting its way. There is a big difference. Of course, one could argue that Zelensky is just trying to negotiate from a position of strength. The problem is, he's weak. And the media is weak. The people who support Ukraine are weak. You may think, but Ukraine's strong. It's got a smaller army, but they're holding back the Russians. It's not about the size of the Russian army. It's about the number of Russians you face. Okay? Russia is fighting with one arm and one eye, while Ukraine is supporting with the backing of Europe, the United States, Colombian mercenaries. One might argue, and a lot of people do, but Russia's got North Korea and China. Yeah, they also had Iran. Iran thought they could use the Ukraine war to fuck around and find out. You know, that this geopolitical positioning, I should say, or that Russia has been maneuvered into, has been years in the making, since 2014 with the coup, and the provocation on Russia has been immense. I think many presidents, not just one, have deliberately ignored or tried to bully Russia, and that is why Russians have their back against the wall, and they feel that their only way forward is to lash out. If you continue to want to get your way in this world without negotiating, without compromising, you are going to find eventually that enough people are just going to stand around and point the finger at you and say, you're a bully. Whether it's the weak-minded or not. The reality is, whether you believe they're weak-minded or not, the reality is Ukraine isn't winning. And winning is everything in the court of public opinion. And you may think being the loudest voice in the room, having all dozens of obviously paid off YouTubers who have expensive camera equipment, appear out of nowhere, always have the same amount of views every day. I mean, I'm struggling here to understand why people continue to believe the propaganda when it's clear. It's not just Al Jazeera, but it's clear, even reading The Guardian, that all you have to do is spend 5 minutes on the map. Not even 5 minutes. Bang. Tell me, just instantly, does that look like Ukraine is winning? Does that look like Ukraine is on the verge of marching to Moscow next winter? Sorry, before winter? You know, everybody wants to talk about how brave the Ukrainians is. Or this Colombian. But bravery. It isn't brave for a leader to sacrifice its citizens. It isn't brave for Ukraine to fire drone after drone into Russia because they're financially supported by foreign countries, okay? Ukraine is bankrupt. If Europe wants to continue supporting Ukraine, they too will end up being bankrupt. China is betting on a Western economic collapse. Many in America are betting on a financial collapse within a year. Many YouTubers are pushing, and some of them once very credible people, I should say, are betting that the financial system will collapse. There are many YouTubers who are betting that China will collapse, that Russia will collapse. And for years, sometimes over a decade, you've had YouTubers constantly lie about the state of the world. Yet people seem to live in this bubble and they are constantly lied to. But because these constant lies feed into the bias of the observer and the weak-minded love their daily hit of dopamine, whether it's the pat on the head, metaphorically, by being told what a good little drone you are for tuning in and you're special because only I, Hassan Piker, or many others, okay, bring you the truth about the world. The fact is, and I think I've said it before, Ukraine ain't a good country, folks. Russia was on the verge of being a Western ally. You could have made peace. But because of I'm not saying it's just the boomers, because most of it's the millennials. See, the boomers and the millennials are the highest population in and right now together, and they are on the left. The boomers have gotten so greedy that they're betting the farm on everything, to grab the Russian resources, right? Because they are addicted to constant growth. They always want more. You look at acquisitions and mergers, particularly look at Disney. You look at the failures of AT&T. You look at Intel. You look at, I'm trying to think, because there are some successful mergers and acquisitions, companies that have engaged in successful mergers and acquisitions. Now, I could go on for hours, and maybe I should point out, but most of the channels that are pro-Ukrainian, its viewers aren't going to give up, right? I think it's pointless pointing out that there are gutless people who won't look in the mirror and say, why isn't what I believe matching what is in the battlefield? And that is because those who watch pro-Ukrainian channels refuse to look at anything but pro-Ukrainian news. They refuse to analyze the news. They refuse to listen to other points of views. Now, we have multiple conflicting reports And this is the problem. It's possible that Russia took Zelensky yesterday. I don't think it's updated in Donetsk. We will go to the battlefield map moment. It's basically, it's going to be more of the same, right? They're not going to give you context on what Russia hit. They're not going to say if the drone was under control or jammed or fell from the sky. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is not saying that a lot, but what he does say is he uses the word maybe. He is open to a deal, and he has actually recognised that factually some territory, that Russia is controlling factually some of the territory in Ukraine. And it has to be a factual recognition. It's not a political recognition. I think he's trying to say lip service, okay? It's not enough for Europe to pay lip service to the fact that Russia holds territory in Ukraine. I think he's trying to say that they have to fundamentally agree that the only peaceful path forward is to give up on the notion that we're going to make a deal that is temporary. That it has to be a deal that is not political, it's not economic, but it's human. That it's not a left thing or a right thing. That Europe is saying that these territories are Russian, and going forward will treat them as Russian. Now he said maybe, which means clearly he knows more than we do, and that he is saying that some territory is Russian, and that perhaps Ukraine has to acknowledge that some territory is Russian, and that they have to fundamentally rewrite their outlook, that they're not merely biding time, but accepting that this territory is Russian. Meanwhile, the Germans, French, and London Stan wants more pressure on Russia. Now, you know about pressure cooking. You know what happens when you turn up the heat? Right? You get to a certain point. Because won't explain the chemistry of it. I sort of understand what happens. And it's sort of what happens with the human psyche. Everybody has their breaking point. Chemistry, physics, our fundamental view of the world. We're able to recognize patterns. And do you not remember World War I? The political pressure that France brought to bear by making threats on Germany about the interference in the affairs of Serbia, despite the fact that Serbia was part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire and that the Serbians, Hungarians, Austrians all supported and asked for Germany's help to deal with the rioting and looting and general criminality of a certain group who became known as the Bolsheviks. But France, because we stand in solidarity with the socialists, caused World War I. Yet most people fail to recognise that again, we have the German socialists in the guise of the Social Democrats, the French in the guise of a somewhat socialist party, forget the name of Macron's socialist, but and Keir Stammer, a Marxist, which is a form of socialism, right? So you have the socialists in Europe all wanting to bring more pressure on Russia. It's like, it's the Austrian-Hungarian Empire all over again. The pressure cooker is whistling, and they say, "Yeah, let's nail the lid down and boil them out, folks." And how did World War I end? Mutual loss. Okay, there was no actual winner to World War I. I think everybody fundamentally recognises that they destroyed way more of their own population, of their own economies, though a lot of people, particularly technocrats, point to, yeah, but look at the technological advance. We had World War I gave us aircraft and tanks and long-range artillery, which had better photography, and we went from horses to cars, and from cars and radios at the beginning of primitive cars at the beginning of World War One, and then World War Two. We went from biplanes to monoplanes to jets, from radio to television to colour television. They did, by the way. Germany had colour TV before the rest of the world. I think the first colour TV broadcast was actually the Olympic Games in Germany. Germany had colour film, America did not. Had pretty much electronics, computing. A lot of people at initial, particularly technocrats, said, "Oh, but World War II had a greater outcome for the advancement of humanity," and that there are a segment of society that sees war as a great leap forward. And that may sound familiar because Mao was one of them who believed that the Chinese Civil War was a great leap forward. And that fundamentally, of course, once socialists get in power, they instantly become conservative. And a lot of people misunderstand what conservative means. Conservative isn't a political ideology. That's a mistake that so many make. Conservative merely means that you have, well, okay, you can call it a political ideology, but it's not a singular political ideology. It's merely, I want to keep things as they are at this time and place in history. But it's not entirely as rigid as people make it out to be. What they want, and most conservatives want in the West, is to conserve capitalism and freedoms and certain rights while taking away the excesses of what people call rights, which are in fact privileges. They don't think entirely that welfare is a bad idea. It's just they want to take away the excesses, right? They want to take away the parasites, although it's hard to actually distinguish sometimes between a parasite and people caught in circumstances. So there is that grey area everywhere. In politics, we should recognise there are grey areas. There are areas where there's no good and no bad, but just a mess. And if you study the Ukraine war enough, you say, yeah, this is a grey area. It's a mess. Because there aren't, Germany's not acting in the interest of Germany, it's acting in the interest of BlackRock, who wants to get the resources of the Donbass. And this goes back actually to the 1930s, when a Welsh engineer was basically plotting and planning the Donbass for the Russian Empire, but in reality, you could say that the British were, eyeing off. And they did. They were working out, particularly, all the way back, to the 1800s, working out how to undermine the Tsar. And they pretty much had. The Tsar was very weak politically at home and abroad. I think just so many mistakes were made that it's impossible to undo. And right now, if the only way forward is for the people to say Merkel 2.0, Macron, who's basically Little Napoleon, and Zelensky's Little Napoleon 2.0, and Keir Stammer, who's Little Napoleon, who's pretty much under the control of Saudi Arabia, just has to go, right? Although, sorry, Keir Stammer is under the control of the Bank of England, who's under the control of BlackRock, which is under the control of a consortium which includes Saudi Arabia. It's far more sophisticated. The WEF is not one entity. Okay, it's not even under Klaus Schwab anymore. It's under the dictator of Nestle, who, by the way, got his fortune from stealing from his fellow Jews to found Nestle. He got his money from the War Compensation Fund for World War II, which many families never saw any money from whatsoever, because certain people make everything about them, and America puts their thumb on the scales for those who... And this is the problem, the amount of corruption in the world, the amount of people putting their thumb on the scales. And it's so hard that when ununified voices or people who have better ideas cannot progress past the handful of admirers, because the majority out there want their bias confirmed rather than to be presented with reality and make decisions based on reality. And I said it. There was a time Ukraine could have stopped the Russian army, could have come to a quick resolution to this war, and ended it, I wouldn't say amicably, but basically détente, right? You say you can't go further, and we're not going to turn around and bite you on the arse later. Now, the world is not static. It's constantly changing, and Ukraine is losing manpower. But not just manpower, it's losing the faith of its people. We only get scant information that now and again that there are riots, looting, claims that somebody's a Russian agent who conducted sabotage. Now and again, there are bombs thrown into police stations, large-scale rioting, dozens per day trying to leave Ukraine, either into Moldavia, some into this Trans-Moldavia or whatever it is. Others try to get into Romania through the rivers. Or the scant few every day who are let into Poland to work and never come back. Well, some get into Hungary as well the same way, or Slovakia the same way. They secure a job, and although they're sending money back, they're not coming home. Although most of these jobs go to women, and you know what the women are doing. You know what? You know the reality. There have been many, and in fact, up until 2022, The Guardian used to be complaining about how Ukraine and successive Ukrainian governments have pretty much just made deals with women to go abroad to sell their bodies for sex and send money back home through Ukrainian organised crime, who pretty much govern Ukraine. Nobody wants to seem to admit the truth because politics clouds the minds of the weak. Right? Weak people let themselves be governed by ideology. Ideology isn't based on fact, it's based on emotion. So more on the left than on the right. Most of the right, however, just cannot seem to get over the fact, right, that Russia is today isn't Russia of 1945. Yet so many people in America, particularly boomers like Lindsey Graham, just seem to operate like Stalin's in charge, you know? At least Kennedy Democrats had the good sense to realize that Brezhnev was different. All right, so we got some movement on the battlefield, but not much here in the north. This is probably territory that Trump is talking about, this and other little incursions. Now, there are some Ukrainian incursions. Nobody talks about them. Somebody said today, I think it was on Fox, I forget his name, he was an undersecretary, somebody from formerly DOD, said that currently Putin sits at 18.5% of Ukraine, and Ukraine has 1% in comparison, right? 1% of its landmass, right? So the amount of territory that Ukraine holds in Russia is equal to 1% of Ukrainian territory. So a proposed land deal would start there. Now, I forget where it was. Whether it was on Maria or Lorraine or that doesn't really matter. People are just going to dismiss. Some people are just always going to dismiss this Fox News talking point. But Russia is clearly building what it calls the buffer zone and has advanced in the north. Now, why it hasn't advanced here? It's a matter of priority. Again, Russia doesn't seem to want to push into Kupiansk. Again, it looks to, I believe that Russia is looking at Kupiansk as leverage, as a means to hold back, to detain thousands of Ukrainian soldiers while they work on other areas. Yet there's slow progress in other areas. But it's still progress, right? Now, again, these are small gains, but they are gains. And every gain represents, now Ukraine now and again has been able to, small battlefield victories, inflict is the word I was looking for, inflict small battlefield victories, but overall, they don't mean anything. It's like, yeah, so you destroyed a command outpost. Russia does that every day. You know, how many officers, there's no real breakdown of how many Ukrainian officers or that. But you look on the close-up of the map, right? This is the reality, right? Russia sitting here, hitting Kharkivskia, while in other areas they are slowly making progress. Okay, They've taken this town. They haven't, yep, true, they haven't taken all of this. They have taken this. Still fighting in this area. Small advances. And then you get another advance here. Alright. Got another advance here. Okay, this was... So, a breakthrough. Russia having taken a few small towns. Laying siege here. Attacking here. Cutting off the supply line through here. This rail line being used to move supplies down here. On, forget what it was. Their old passenger trains that they're running on the lines with diesels. But, yeah, they've made some advances around here as well. You see they've moved further north here. They still haven't taken all of this, but all of this. But you see they're pushing up. They've moved here. They've still, keeping. But they're pushing up here into Marianad. Now, it seems to have changed tact. The northward movement has suddenly turned into a western movement. All right, the spur here is gone. Right, we don't know why. There's no blue mark that indicates what happened, but they're no longer indicated as being on the edge of, well, they could be going around, okay? But there's multiple lines here. Like I said, it's believed that thousands of Ukrainians have moved into these areas here to stop the Russians coming up through here. And it's possible the Russians are going to come round and come at an angle up here, and that would cut this supply line. If they can't come up through here, they'll come up through here. Either way, it'd be easier for them, you'd think, but you never know. You don't know how. There might be a weakness on the flank. It might be cutting off the supply lines to here, coming up here and cutting this off. We'll cut this off and allow them to come forward, pushing back. Because it depends where the Ukrainians have their rocket forces. Because, Ukrainian rocket forces are more important than the Ukrainian drones. Okay, the Ukrainian drones are good for headlines, but the rocket forces are the bulk of what's keeping the Russians from making more progress. Okay, but they are making progress. There are breakthroughs every day. There are breakthroughs on the front that move a kilometre, which is big for, particularly when you consider that most of these towns, you look how densely packed Ukraine is with small towns. Then most of them are only a few hundred people in each. Now, of course, a lot of people don't sit there and do the simple basic maths and realise that Ukraine, if Russia was taking one town a day, and you look at all these small towns, I'm not talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days. You look at it, right? Zoom in. Look at all the names on the map. And then you realize that that is not just there, it's all the way. That these little areas, these little areas, all of them, represent, and there's not much progress, but they all represent hundreds of Ukrainians and hundreds of Russians. And yet, out of the, I would say, 10 to 20,000 engaged in combat, you compare that to World War One, you compare that to World War Two. This is a very light engagement, though it is not to dismiss the heavy weight that people feel for where. Now, this isn't dead, but statistically, the majority of the dead are Ukrainian, right? And they've lost 1,335 in the last day. So, again, this is less casualties than previous, right? In the past, casualties were on the rise. That they got as high as 2,000 per day. This is a huge reduction. Because remember, Center itself when Battle Group Center was pushing through here, through Chavez Yar and all the way and Torsk and all the way out here through here it is, New York. Remember, they were fighting back down here in Torsk and pushing through here. They were doing just 1,000 a day on their own. And once this fell, they were able to push through very rapidly here and push out. Now, other battle groups have pushed up as well, but the majority of deaths on the Ukrainian side, doesn't mean that it's not about how brave you are, right? Bravery and tenacity only gets you so far, right? Ukraine can keep talking about winning, but the reality is they're only fighting because they don't want to face reality, okay? Europe doesn't want to face reality. Now, Trump has called out Zelensky publicly, and the media, and I would include most of the US media, hasn't shown this. This was cut off. You can see here the screenshot. It came through Clash Report. Now, Trump announced, and he delivered a speech at a press conference in the White House. Most of the media didn't show what he said, they only reported on it. But he has given a speech in which he said, land for peace will be discussed with the Russian president. And this statement clashes directly with what Ukraine's president was saying earlier about refusal to consider any territorial concessions. But Trump said they have occupied some very prime territory. We're going to try and get some of that territory back for Ukraine. Of course, that implies that some will remain under Russian control. We have Mark Rutte saying that we must accept or recognize this. Recognize. Now, the fact that you have to go to Russian media to get the full story of what's happening is not new. Okay, you will have many people who are reporting, and I've said this many times. We're not talking about the collapse of China anymore because China has collapsed. It's gone as far as it will go, though. Every day there's small feckless attempts for the Chinese economy to dig its way out of the hole. Instead of accepting reality that they have destroyed the international car market, the international electric car market, I should say, solar panels. They've destroyed consumer electronics, and that people are no longer investing in China because even when China is successful, if you invest $1 billion, you're lucky to get $1 billion back. Basically, you're lucky that after 20 years of investments in China, that you're lucky to make your money back. Apple has fundamentally recognized that they're not going to expand in China anymore because China selfishly doesn't understand the fundamentals of the market. Most people don't. Most people believe arrogantly that particularly China, and they're not the only one who does this. Russia used to do this as well. That when somebody moves into your market, you wait for them to build up and then you nationalize the business. Venezuela did this. Brazil's going to do it. It was even a time that America, remember with the nationalization of steel, the compensation of gold, the Roosevelt era, people have really fundamentally starting to realize that, and even Apple realizes that India is a temporary solution. Even Vietnam is a temporary solution. But Apple knows that it can't, and I think Trump knows this too. I hope he does. That you can't manufacture everything in the United States. The manufacturing capacity for large global businesses has to be fairly distributed based on the market, not on where, you can't ship the world's resources to the United States and then ship all the world's goods out of the United States. You have to recognize that, particularly with the car industry, that it was once predominantly European and for a while predominantly Japanese, that it's going to be pretty much divided evenly between China and the rest of the world. And that Japan, America, and Europe have to work together to hold on. Solar panels. China produces crappy solar panels. America should be lifting up the German solar panel industry and working with the rest, okay? The problem is so many people have the competitive mindset and that there must be only one. Now, again, I think this is a fundamental problem with politics, that it's either you got the left, which is all state-owned, or the right, which wants everything to eventually fall in the hands of one monopoly or remain in the hands of its creator. But the reality on the ground is, whether or not it's reported on the battlefield map or not, or whether or not Russia's lying, although so far there's been no evidence that they have, it's just, in the last 24 hours, the several stories have come out with different towns, and they don't reflect previous statements. But Russia has been not liberated, but they've hit drone and in Dnipro, which we see on the map. We know where that is. We were just there not long ago. Here we go. Where is it? But it is this. Damn it. Look. It's a pin. It's only a small singular attack. But remember, in one attack, 365 people in one attack, dead or wounded, 6 vehicles, 4 artillery pieces, and 2 electronic warfare stations in one attack. That is significant compared to other battlefield actions. And again, it shows you actually how light. Remember, battle group centered in the past would have inflicted multiple attacks on the Ukrainians in a day. Now, there seems to be varying interpretations, and I'm interpreting this as Russia is simply in the Sigma grind set, and that they are not pushing for what would you call an overwhelming victory. Basically, whatever reason they have, whatever reason they give, won't be acceptable anyway to most. But Putin has said this. He doesn't want to be cruel in his victory. So make of that of what you will. But it does make more sense than, I forget his name, coming out and say Russia's weak, Macron, Trudeau, I think it was Trudeau. Although Trudeau is really, carny. Trudeau is trying to still think that he's the rock star, but look at Canada. Canada's falling apart. You have Wexit, as they're calling it now, where you have Saskatchewan and is it Saskatchewan and Alberta, and now the West, basically Western Canada wanting to break off, and now you have Quebec. Although I think we have no indication, but isn't it funny how 6 months ago everybody was mocking Trump for saying that looks like America will be merging with will be taking over Canada and Greenland. Well, if I was in Greenland right now, I'd be looking at going, we shouldn't have been laughing. We shouldn't have dismissed so heavy-handed. No, I get it. And most people don't. But Trump is thinking in long terms. That to him, things make sense. Sometimes to us, they don't. That's fine. But if just because something doesn't make sense to you doesn't mean it's wrong or stupid, or doesn't actually mean you're stupid. It's about how much information we have sometimes. And when we look at the Ukrainian battlefield, absolutely, there is a fundamental difference between what the media reports and what is happening on the ground. And as you look at it most of the time, they're not reporting that much. But at least now they're talking about a Ukrainian deal and what Trump is offering. But the Ukrainian ambassador, of course, they're all biased, right? They all want to... Now, I get it. Whether you believe it or not, the politics that is driving this narrative, that the media thinks that if they can get enough people to agree with them, that they could control the narrative. And if they control the narrative, reality warps and changes to what they want, right? And you see that, right? It's basically Orwellian, right? Where they basically say the party is, we're at war with Eurasia. We've always been at war with Eurasia. And people will believe it. And basically they go around changing the records. But that's what that's where we're headed. If you constantly want to believe in politics rather than what is true. Because to the left, they think everything is temporary, nothing matters except power. Okay, true. Once they have power, they can rewrite history. But that doesn't mean they're right. And just because they're obtuse and obstinate doesn't mean they're right. And Ukraine ultimately will pay the price, and so will Europe if they do not get out of this stupor of believing that they can shape history and shape narratives. Because I'm of the opinion 1984 is pretty much ends on they're looking back and realizing that they're watching the collapse, right? The party's nothing but film footage. That the ministry isn't this big, all-powerful machine, but a handful of old bureaucrats clinging to power, hidden, and the war's a facade, that it's already lost, everything's falling apart. That's the people in the theatre, that's all that's left of the party, right? Any day now that everything's going to collapse. It's the end, right? It's literally the end. That they'll go to their deaths. Everybody is going to their deaths chanting the party's always right, But it's the end. There's no future, right? There's only a handful of kids, There's nobody to take over, right? That the proletariat have won simply by surviving. That the party has collapsed. That there's no future, right? That they've killed themselves off. But people rather just scream and shout, but we're seeing a quiet rebellion. Whether it's in China or Italy or whatever. And that is, people are starting to reject the media, reject the party, reject the idea of a party. And once enough people look at Canada, for Western Canada to no longer believe in Canada, well, that's what happens when the majority don't want to face reality and merely want to live off the productivity of others. This is the same in England, it's the same in Germany, it's the same everywhere, right? That there is a large voting bloc of people who vote just to keep robbing you. And when there's no more to rob, when there's nothing left to rob, they send the youth to war so that they can rob others, so that they can keep up the lifestyle to which they've become accustomed, whether that's free healthcare or the aristocrats living extraordinary rich lives. And it's amazing if you look back and think, wow, the Duke of York lived an extraordinary, all that war in all those wars, the Napoleonic era, and the Duke of York was living on £1,000. Yeah, but literally that was £1,000 of gold stolen. But they burned through it, right? Yet you look at their lifestyle and you go, where did all that go? Where did it all go? It's the lost lives. It's paying people, but they don't have that anymore. They can't keep paying people off. They can't keep up their armies anymore. They can't keep up the facade anymore. People want to live. People want ordinary lives. And I think if enough people had actually understood that and get this message out there to others, that the politicians and their arrogance and their egos, particularly Zelensky, don't matter. Zelensky's power is in that he has big backers behind him. But you take away those backers who rely on US aid, who rely on the West, on the media and their political arrogance. And the only way we're going to end this war, I think, is to basically do what the left did. Go after the advertisers. All right? Look at the advertisers. We have to break up Google. We have to break up Facebook. We have to break up some of these big conglomerates. And you'll watch. You won't have wars like Ukraine anymore. Or Serbia. Or Croatia. Or any other. Or Sudan. Gaza. How many wars are going on simply because some big conglomerate somewhere can dangle money in front of a corrupt politician? And without corrupt businesses like the WEF trying to shape reality and buying corrupt politicians and putting weak people like Keir Stammer in office, well, start to get people like Conor McGregor, Trump, Georgia. Now these Viktor Orban. You'll get people who come to office not because they are claiming to be servants of the people, but they come from the people, spend their time in office, whether it's a long time or a short time, working for the people, because they know they have to go back to the people. Now we need more changes. We need constitutional change, not in fundamental rights, but in how government is held accountable. And we need a government that is held accountable to the people. So that the next time you have a Barack Obama making promises he can't or won't keep. Barack Obama had 3 years to keep all his promises. He was unopposed, yet he did nothing. He should have been thrown out of office. But because Democrats are belligerent and obtuse, all they care about is being in power. But as you see, without the illegal vote, he would have never been in power. And without Barack Obama, we wouldn't have had a Ukraine war. Because there wouldn't have been a coup in Ukraine. Instead, there would have been a peace deal through the intermediate treaty which would have had Ukraine, Belarus and Russia all joining Europe peacefully, happily, cooperatively, without billions or trillions spent. And you've got to ask yourself, all these billions, where did they go? Who did they go to? Will we ever get answers? Well, the problem is, I think we won't, because too many people stand in the way. We have judges with way too much power, who, after court cases are over, you want the Epstein files? Look at the judges who are blocking the way. No, stop asking politicians to release the files. Start looking at the judges who have the files. Because remember, it's the judiciary at the end of the day, and the judiciary is working for itself. But until people do something more, even if you just click like, please, if you want to end this war, click like. Say it. Let YouTube know. Let others know that you want this war over. If you want the Epstein files, end the Ukraine war. Because there's one less obstacle, one less thing to distract Congress. And the Epstein files goes beyond the United States. Stammer, what is he hiding? How often was, you got to remember, Epstein and Maxwell were operating in the UK and in France. So please, get just a like. But if you want to go further, you can support me on Patreon, or buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And bye for now.